Back in the days of the king Ahab of Israel and the king Jehoshaphat of Judah. So let's get right into it. What we need to do is read the text. I need 6 readers. We're talking about, you might circle 2 Chronicles 18. That's where we're going to go. 2 Chronicles 18, we're going to read 1 through 34. I think that's the best text to get the whole sense of the story from. So I need a reader for 1 through 7. Who's got 1 through 7? All right, Shannon. And 8, did you ever get another shot? No. Oh, man, that's the way it works, though, isn't it? 8 through 11. All right. Larry's got 8 through 11, 12 to 17. 12 to 17. Oh, all right. And Kirk, I gave you 12, 17, right? 18 to 22. All right, Ron. Not too many big words in there, Ron. You should do okay. I'm just giving it back to him. 23 to 27. All right, Doc. And no Latin words in there, so you should be good. 28 to 30. He's a doctor, if you didn't know. So 28 to 34. What's that? The first one is 1 through 7. Oh, 2 Chronicles. What did I say? 2 Chronicles 18. Yeah. 2 Chronicles, not 2 Corinthians. It reads a little differently. And then the last one, 28 to 34. Who's got that? Bobby. Okay. Here we go. 2 Chronicles chapter 18, 1 to 34. Everybody got your assignment? Let's go. There's more to it, but that's enough for us to learn about Micaiah. Let's get some historical context. Ahab became king of Israel in 874 BC. That's 874 years before Christ came. He became king, and he was likely the most evil of all kings of Israel, and was married to, who was Ahab's wife? Jezebel. Jezebel. And when you go to 1 Kings, the reference there, it talks about him being an evil king, and it says if that wasn't enough, he married Jezebel. So she was wickedier. No, not that I know of. No, Jehoshaphat allied himself with Ahab through marriage, but I don't know how that figured in. Jezebel was the daughter of another guy who was a bad guy too. It says who her daddy was, and it wasn't Jehoshaphat. But somehow, and it doesn't give the details about that marriage of Jehoshaphat's either, how that worked, but somehow that related him and allied him with Ahab. Jehoshaphat became king of Judah in 870 BC. So how many years after Ahab became king did Jehoshaphat become king? 4 years. 4 years later. It's a little confusing because you're counting backwards because it's before Christ. But that's how we count time. So 870 BC is when Jehoshaphat became king. He was one of Judah's best kings. One of the best. And those two passages there testify to his character, his godliness, his pursuit of God, and of getting the word of God taught among the people. He wasn't perfect, but he was pretty good. Jehoshaphat allied himself by marriage to Ahab. And that's just one passage, 2 Chronicles 18:1. Doesn't give us any details any more than that. What do you think about that, though? What crosses your mind? Do what? She must have been a piece of work. Okay, that's a good way to put that. And we don't know anything about her except that she in some way was important to Ahab. But what about Ahab? Would you want to ally yourself with Ahab? He was a bad guy. I don't know that I would have wanted to do that. I'm not trying to make a critical judgment against Jehoshaphat, but I'm just saying in our political climate today, we know how alliances can go, and any association you have with anybody can work against you. That's true. Unless, now if you're talking about the world's political dealings, yes. But if you really want power, who do you need to align yourself with? Only God. Yeah, really. If you marry a, what's that? That's true. And it doesn't say anything about her, except the only thing this tells us is Jehoshaphat had a willingness to make an alliance with the worst king Israel ever had. What's up with that? And it's interesting to me also that there is no commentary except this whole account of what happens. And I know we're doing this to talk about Micaiah, and we're winding up talking about Jehoshaphat and Ahab, but there's no way to get around talking about them to some degree. What does Ahab tell Jehoshaphat when they go into battle? Did you catch that? Yeah, you dress like a king. Hey, buddy. You ever watch any of those war movies where they're in a camp that's in close to the enemy territory, and some new guy comes up and salutes an officer? What's that officer tell him? Don't be saluting me. There's snipers out there. They see you salute me, they're going to pop me because I'm an officer. They're going to know by what you do. So same thing here. And what does the king of Aram tell his people? The king of the Syrians. Don't fight with anybody except who? You find who you think is the king, and that's the guy you go after. Well, who'd they go after? They went after Jehoshaphat. Do you think Jehoshaphat had any thoughts while he's up in that chariot and all these guys are coming after him, say, what have I done? Following, because he didn't just make this alliance with Ahab, but he agreed to go to war with Ahab at Ramoth Gilead. He didn't have to do that either. But we're getting back down to some more stuff here. When Micaiah appears on the scene in Ahab's court, and this is messed up. There should only be one blank. I meant for there to be two blanks and not have years in there, because what was going to be in the blank was 3 years. You remember when Elijah challenged Ahab, said, come up on Mount Carmel, let's have a contest. You bring your prophets, have them call on their gods and see if they'll bring down fire to burn up a sacrifice, and I'll call on the true and living God and see if he'll send down fire for our sacrifice. And you know how that went. And so when that was over, Elijah and those who were with him took those 850, that's how many there are there, that's the next blank, took those 850 prophets of Jezebel's and killed them. That was 3 years plus back in history by the time Micaiah shows up in Ahab's court. But that's just a little bit of, what's that? Well, there were 450 prophets of Baal, but then there were another 400 prophets of the Asherah. And there's let's see, I forget which. That's chapter 18, 19. Chapter 18, verse 19. Send and gather to me all Israel in Mount Carmel, together with 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of the Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So there's 850 prophets on the payroll. That's a lot of clergy for an idolatrous woman like that, but nevertheless, that's how many he wiped out. But that was 3 years prior at least to what's happening here with Micaiah. No, the events concerning Micaiah. Ahab blanks and blanks Jehoshaphat, and this is a term from our vernacular. He wines and dines him. When you look at chapter 18 there, verse 2, some years later he went down to visit Ahab at Samaria, and Ahab slaughtered many sheep and oxen for him and the people who were with him, and induced him to go up against Ramoth Gilead. Wined and dined Jehoshaphat and induces him to join in battle against Ramoth Gilead, held by the Arameans or the Syrians. Just take a quick break here, and I know it's taken us a while to get to Micaiah, but look at Proverbs chapter 23. Just on a side note here. Proverbs 23, 1 through 3 says this. When you sit down to dine with a ruler, consider carefully what's before you and put a knife to your throat. Isn't that a funny turn of phrase? Put a knife to your throat if you're a man of great appetite. Do not desire his delicacies, for it is deceptive food. I don't know that this would have applied anywhere better than it does with Jehoshaphat sitting down to be fed by Ahab. And then look at verse 6, Proverbs 23, 6. Do not eat the bread of a selfish man, or desire his delicacies, for as he thinks within himself, so he is. He says to you, eat and drink, but his heart is not with you. You'll vomit up the morsel you've eaten and waste your compliments. I think that's about probably what Jehoshaphat was doing in his chariot while all the Arameans in the world were trying to kill him, because he was the one that looked like the king out on the battlefield, and that was Ahab's doing. Ahab had convinced him to dress like the king, and Ahab put on his regular robes. All right, number 2. Jehoshaphat requests that before they go into battle, they hear a blank from the blank. A word from the Lord. They hear a word from the Lord. Had all these hundreds of prophets, literally hundreds of prophets, false prophets, 400 of them, saying, go on up there. In response, Ahab assembles blank 100 of his own prophets. Well, blank 100. Blank. Yeah, I know. Go ahead and laugh. It's funny. And I already told you anyway. And it's in the text. 400. 400 of his own prophets. That's a lot of yes guys. That's what they were.
These 400 prophets, did they lie to Ahab, or did they tell him the truth what the Lord told them? Because I didn't understand the way it said it here.
Do you remember what Micaiah will say?
They said that someone came up to open the seal, Ahab.
Right,
So he said he's going to do the spirits.
right. There was, what Micaiah said he was told by the Lord was that there was one who said, I'll go down and I'll be a deceiving spirit in the mouth of his prophets. So what they were saying is not accurate, whether or not their intention is to lie, but they're telling a lie. Just like if somebody tells me something that's a lie and I repeat it without checking it out, I'm spreading a lie. So the intention might not be there, but it's a lie nonetheless. So this is number 2A. In response, Ahab assembles 400 of his own prophets who prophesy favorably of his plans for battle, even using blanks as visual aids. Did you get that? Horns. Zedekiah used iron horns. I can just see him put those things on it. Like a big bull or a cow or something. I don't know what he was like, but that's what it says he did. B, Jehoshaphat blanks in his desire to hear from a prophet of the Lord. He persists. That's the exact word. Have you been looking off my sheet here? He persists in his desire to hear from a prophet of the Lord. Is there a lesson there for us? What could he have said? He could have said, well, we've got 400 guys right here telling us what to believe. Are you paying any attention to politics? How many people are willing to give you bad information, whether they know it's bad information or not? Do you watch the news? Who do you trust? Was it in here we talked about Mark Twain's quote? He said, if you don't read the newspapers, you're uninformed. If you do read the newspapers, you're misinformed. How do you get informed? Well, in this world, it's hard to be perfectly informed, but not with the Lord. C, 2C, Ahab reluctantly admits to having blank prophet of the Lord available. 1, we got a guy on retainer, but what about him? He complains that this prophet blank speaks good concerning him. Never. He never speaks good concerning him. It's Micaiah. Number 3, Micaiah is summoned. But when blanked by the king's messenger to speak favorably of Ahab, I would put warned. So you got that? Ahab told his messenger, go get Micaiah, bring him in here to testify. And then the messenger brings him in and says, now listen, Micaiah, all the king's prophets have spoken favorably about what the king wants to do. You need to do the same thing. What could Micaiah have done? He could have said, yeah, I'll go along. I'll go with the crowd. I don't want to stand out. I don't want to be persecuted. I don't want to be the odd man out. But what does Micaiah say? He's going to speak what the Lord gives him to speak. Number 4, when given the floor, Micaiah at first apparently feigns blank with Ahab's prophets. Agreement. He feigns agreement with Ahab's prophets, but is quickly adjured by Ahab to speak. What would you put in that blank? I'd put truthfully. Speak truthfully. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read this and I see Ahab's response to Micaiah, this is the way I see it going down. Micaiah, tell me what's going to happen. Oh yeah, king, go on up there. You're going to do great. It's going to be wonderful. You're just going to slaughter them all. Because there was something about the way Micaiah said it that was apparently obvious to Ahab. He's blowing smoke. So he says, Micaiah, how many times? What does that tell you? We've been through this before. Tell me the truth. Now, why do you think an exchange like this might take place? Any biblical principle at work here? What did Jesus say about your pearls? Don't cast them before the swine. Don't give that which is holy to the dogs. Why not? They'll turn around and tear you up. You give your most valuable stuff to pigs and dogs, they don't care. They'll tear you up. What did Ahab have no interest in whatsoever? Truth. He didn't care about truth. He didn't care about God. Who's the only person he cared about? Himself. The only reason he listened to Jezebel is because she was mean. He knew it. Yeah, you can giggle if you want to, but tell me it's not true. He was all upset. Remember Naboth's vineyard? Naboth had a vineyard, and Ahab wanted it. And he's whining and moping around. Poor little me. I don't have Naboth's vineyard. I'm the king. I got everything else, but I don't have Naboth's vineyard. And Jezebel says, hey, accuse him of doing something, and when you find him guilty, put him in jail and have him executed and take his stuff, confiscate his stuff. And that's exactly what they did. Ahab never said, well, I can't do that. That's not right. He didn't care about truth. He cared about himself. What should he have said when Micaiah came in and said what he said there in number 4? I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains, like sheep which have no shepherd. And the Lord said, these have no master. Let each of them return to his house in peace. What should Ahab have done right then and there? Stayed home. Oh man, we better not do this. That's a bad idea. What else? What else? What should Jehoshaphat have done? Jehoshaphat's the one who's been asking for a word from the Lord. Have you ever done this? You ever been, so I wonder what the Lord says about this, and you do a little study and you find, well, this is what the Lord says about that. I'm not going to do that. Remember that lesson on what to do if somebody has offended you, or if you have offended somebody else? What does Jesus teach us to do in chapter 5 if we think we have offended someone? Go to them. What does Jesus teach us in Matthew 18 if somebody has offended us? Go to them. Go to them. What do we never want to do? We never want to go. If we've been the offender, or if we think somebody else has been the offender, it's against our nature. We'd rather talk to somebody else about it than the person we need to be talking to. And that's kind of the situation here. Jehoshaphat should have said, you know I said I'd go with you, but after this, that's not a good idea. I'm going to back out of this one. And I think you should too. None of that going on, as far as we can tell from the text. All right, back side of the sheet, number A, Ahab. There's no blank here. This is basically Ahab's response. What did I tell you about this guy? Yeah, he never says anything good about me. What could have been said by anybody there if they cared about Ahab? They could have said, yeah, they could have said that. That's not what I'm thinking, but they could have said that and they would have been right. They could have said, listen, Ahab, this guy told you the truth. You might not want to hear it, but if you'll listen to him, he'll save your life. He's telling you something you desperately need to know right now. You better give ear to it. Shannon?
What happened the last time one prophet of the Lord went against several hundred false prophets?
Yeah, exactly. That's the historical context. Does anybody learn anything? I read this and I think those people were dumb. And then I go right back and do some of the same stuff I've been doing. Do we learn? We do, but it's usually when something hits us between the eyes. No pun intended with Ahab here in a little while. Of course, it didn't hit him between the eyes. It hit him between the joints in his armor. I'm getting ahead of myself here. B, Micaiah completed his prophecy explaining that he saw God sending a spirit who would blank Ahab through his blank. Did you catch that? The spirit would deceive Ahab through his prophets. And that's exactly what happened. Now, did all of that actually happen? Did that take place before God? It sounds like it did, but it may have simply been a pragmatic way to let Ahab know this is done beforehand. And by the way, is there any question about the righteousness of God in telling Ahab a lie through his prophets? Go to 2 Thessalonians. I meant to put this note in the text, or in the worksheet, but I completely forgot about it. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. We'll break into the context at verse 8. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8. Paul writes this to the church at Thessalonica. Then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth, and bring an end by the appearance of his coming. That is, the one whose coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, with all power and signs and false wonders, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. For this reason, God will send upon them a deluding influence, so that they will believe what is false, in order that they may all be judged who did not believe the truth, but took pleasure in wickedness. What's Paul saying? He's saying if we give ourselves over to evil, God will give us enough line to hang ourselves.
Galatians 6, 7, and 8 says basically the same thing when it mentions that if we do not respond properly to the Lord, we'll reap what we sow.
Yes, absolutely. Same thing. Well, yes, that's what you're talking about. Probably some of you have heard about this. Maybe all of you have. The Department of Wildlife has at least one, maybe more than one, mechanical deer. Do you know what they do with those mechanical deer? They put them off the road, maybe 100 yards or so, set them up so they're completely visible from the road, and that deer might drop his head and bring it back up or lift a leg, whatever he does. He looks like he's alive because it's made from the carcass of an actual deer. What happens? Somebody shoots at him because they're trying to catch these guys that hunt from the road. That's totally illegal. It's very dangerous. You're not supposed to drive along until you see a deer and stop by the road and shoot at it. That's dangerous. And in most cases, it's poaching because you're shooting a deer that's on somebody else's property, so that's what they do. Is that right? Is that fair? Is that entrapment? Who's not going to get in trouble? People who are honest. They're going to go, look at that beautiful buck standing over there. He's been over there for 3 hours. He just moves his head. I shot him 14 times. He hadn't done a thing. Yes.
What about the sexual texting of an undercover man?
Absolutely.
Acting like a lady or a young girl in order to entrap?
Yes.
Same thing.
It's the same thing.
Deceptively trying to warn out
And when people give themselves over to evil, they deserve to reap what they're sowing. They're sowing those seeds, and they deserve to reap a harvest of what they're sowing. I would be upset if I went out in the springtime and planted watermelon seeds and a tomato vine come up. Now, I like tomatoes, but I didn't plant tomatoes. I planted watermelon. I want watermelon. By the way, what do you plant to get a seedless watermelon? There's got to be an answer to that question. That's for next week's class, I guess. But all right. So in B, Micaiah tells them, I was with the Lord, and he said he's going to send a deceiving spirits into your prophets, and that's what's happened, Ahab. So then C, Zedekiah, apparently one of those prophets, and the one using the iron horns, blanks Micaiah and blanks him, saying, how did the Spirit of the Lord pass from me to speak to you? What's the first blank? Did you read it in the text? He slapped him. He struck him. He physically struck Micaiah, and then I would use the word mocked. He mocked him. How did the Spirit of the Lord pass from me to speak to you? What claim is Zedekiah making at that point? He's saying, we have the Spirit of the Lord and you don't. You hear the same thing today in different ways. We've got truth, you don't. We're smart, you're idiots. We're tolerant, you're not. We're democracy-loving Americans. You're Nazis, you're fascists. It's all the same thing. You start calling names, you've left the love of the truth. Well, but that has to be proven. And when there's 400 of you, and you're only telling the king what he wants to hear in the first place. But see, that's the thing with dealing with wickedness. You never know how a wicked king is going to behave. He might say, I'm upset because of what's happened. Who am I going to take it out on? Well, I'll take it out on these stupid prophets. Because there's probably about 5,000 guys waiting in line to be one of the king's prophets. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what Bob was saying. Same idea. Truth has a way of protecting you. It's like when Paul wrote to the church at Ephesus, talked about the armor of God. One of the main parts of that armor was the breastplate of righteousness. If you do what is right, that will protect you. That's what protected Brett Kavanaugh. Because if Brett Kavanaugh had done a bunch of stuff, you can bet they would have found out, and they'd have said, hey, this guy's got all these skeletons in his closet. I can't wait for, well, I don't want to get into that, but it's going to be interesting. You probably know where I'm going. Ahab sentenced, Micaiah promised that Zedekiah would blank himself in an inner room on the day in question. He would hide himself. Day's going to come, Zedekiah. You just slap me and mock me. You're going to be hiding when this day comes in an inner room. You're going to fear for your life, so to speak. Ahab sentenced Micaiah to blank on blank blank until his supposed return. Sentenced him to prison on, I'd put short rations. Water and bread is what he told him specifically, so water and bread is right. Sentenced him to prison on short rations until his supposed return, because Ahab supposed that he would return. Remember that passage in James where James reminds us, we should say, if the Lord wills. Ahab should have said, you put him in prison and give him short rations, and if the Lord wills, when I come back. But he didn't care what the Lord thought. That's why he was putting Micaiah in prison. He should have said, man, put a medal on that guy. Pay him some gold and set him up at my table. He just saved my life. Fire all these 400 guys. But no, none of that. The rest of E, but Micaiah counters by saying that if Ahab does return, the blank had not spoken by him. The Lord If you come back, the Lord's not spoken by me. Tell me that's not a pretty ominous statement right there. You're leaving, buddy, but you ain't coming back. And then Micaiah admonishes all present to hear his words. What does the word admonish mean? Who's got a definition for that? It's a warning. It's like a friendly warning. Oh man, I care about you. You better not do that. That's an admonishment. Number 5, Ahab goes into battle against the Arameans and is killed by an archer who shoots an arrow at random. I have no idea where random is, but that's what this guy was aiming at. Oh, yeah. Oh, shot a man in Reno. Okay. I bet that hurt to get shot right in Reno. But I'm going to try that next time I go hunt, Shannon. I'm going to get up in my tree and I'm just going to start launching arrows out there. See if I can hit a deer. Probably do as good as I'm doing right now. You heard about those hunters that got lost in the woods and they kept shooting up in the air because they heard if you shoot 3 times up in the air, somebody will come and help you. And God said, yeah, you know, the other guy said, well, you shoot 3 times again. So I can't, I'm out of arrows. So anyway, that's number 6. We are told blank, blank of Micaiah. Nothing more. We're not told anything more. All right, let's talk about Micaiah in the 3.5 minutes we got left. Tell me about this guy. What's your impression of him? He was a man of God. And what's that? He had a reputation for speaking truth. That's why he was brought on board. Even if that wasn't a welcome reputation by people who were worldly, who did want to hear from him. Jehoshaphat wanted to hear from him. What did Jehoshaphat do with the information he got from this man of God? He disregarded it, apparently. It doesn't tell us what he thought, what his thought processes were, what his reasoning was, but he didn't listen. What's that tell you and me today? It doesn't matter how right you are. It doesn't matter how accurate you are. It doesn't matter how godly you are. It doesn't matter if what you say is the absolute truth. People may not listen to you. They may not care. And they may do so knowingly to their own hurt. Now, that might sound discouraging, but to me it's encouraging. Why didn't God tell us what happened with Micaiah? Do we need to know? Who would like to know? I would like to know, but do I need to know? Whatever happened with Micaiah, it doesn't change the high regard in which I hold him now, knowing that he stood there. He had 2 kings to face. He had already been set up by the messenger that came for him. You better agree with these 400 prophets. Public opinion was going one direction, and he went totally the opposite. And he never changed his stance. When the sentence was given, take him off to prison and put him on bread and water, he never said, whoa, 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 maybe I misspoke there, Ahab. Let me talk to the Lord again. Who did that back in Numbers? Balaam. Well, let me go back to the Lord, see if I can curse Israel this time. He wouldn't let me do it the first 2 times. Maybe this 3rd time he'll do it. Bob?
This is the same thing we talked about later. As soon as he did that, he took off and ran for 40 days. He was away from Ahab.
Right.
Micaiah stayed right there. You know, but that's the climate that's going on there.
Yeah. What did God ask Elijah when he found him under that juniper tree? Yeah, what are you doing here? How many times did he ask him that question? At least twice. And what did God wind up telling Elijah?
Well,
Yeah, you don't have to answer that, but you've got a comment.
another point.
All right, another point. Go ahead, Dayton.
Well, I was just thinking of the other side of this in regard to what happened to
Okay,
And it's a pretty narrow distance in that armor, and that arrow went right through there.
right.
And when God wants something to go down, it's going down. The other side of that, I think, is so beautifully covered in regard to Jeremiah, when the Babylonian army, world empire, came in against little Judah, and they started, and they did, of course, conquer and take over. But the world emperor told his head military man in Jeremiah 39:11, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, gave charge concerning Jeremiah to Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, saying, you take him and look after him, do him no harm, but you do to him just as he says to you. Now that's the head, that's General MacArthur of the U.S., you know, saying, well, I'll do whatever a Japanese guy says.
Right.
And then, in the 40th chapter, the captain of the guard took Jeremiah, said to him, the Lord your God has pronounced this doom on this place, Judah. And now the Lord has brought it and has done it just as he said, because you people have sinned against the Lord and not obeyed his voice. Therefore this thing is done unto you, and now, look, I free you this day. Here's the enemy of the nation from which Jeremiah was, coming to set him free from his own people.
Exactly.
And from the chains. And that were on your hand. If it seems good to you to come with me to Babylon, come, and I'll look after you. But if it seems best for you to come with me to Babylon, or not to come, remain here. See, all the land is before you. Whatever seems good and convenient for you to go there. And it's just such a tremendous security blanket of God's care for a prophet that would see desolation go on all around.
And you see the contrast of the heathen pagan king like Nebuchadnezzar saying, I'm going to take care of God's prophet. And Ahab, king of Israel, says, put him in prison, give him short rations. You also see, just before we close, back in 2 Chronicles 18, this preservation of God. When the king of Aram told him to go out and kill the king, it says that they went after Jehoshaphat, thinking he was king of Israel, but it says this in verse 31, Jehoshaphat cried out, and the Lord helped him, and God diverted them from him. How'd he do that? I don't know. But God somehow preserved Jehoshaphat and diverted the enemies from him. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why didn't he just tell old Jehoshaphat, you goofball, what'd you listen to Ahab for? What'd you make an alliance with me? Why didn't you do what my prophet said to do? You're out there, I'm just going to let you die. Oh, God didn't do that. He preserved him and diverted the enemy away from him. So take heart, even when we're being goofy, sometimes God will watch over us. He's done that for me all my life. So, oh well. Anything else as we close? I appreciate it. Lord willing, come back next week and we'll look at somebody else who's obscure.